INFJs are naturally inclined toward spirituality. They are intuitive and inward-focused, often seeking to understand themselves and the world beyond what is visible or tangible. For many INFJs, the quest for spiritual truth begins early in life, spurred by a sense of being different, a feeling of inner depth, or an intuitive awareness of realities that others might overlook. Their inner world is rich and complex, and many INFJs report a persistent sense of being called towards something greater. Spiritual awakening for an INFJ is rarely dramatic in an outward sense. Instead, it is more likely to be a slow and organic unfolding, a deepening awareness of the interconnectedness of all life, and a realization that the material world is only part of a greater reality. This awakening may be triggered by life challenges, existential questions, a period of isolation, or even moments of intense beauty or synchronicity. The INFJ will often reflect deeply on these experiences, using their intuition and emotional insight to decipher the spiritual significance behind events. This process can also be accompanied by a dark night of the soul, a phase where the INFJ feels lost, disconnected from old beliefs, or overwhelmed by existential despair. These moments, though painful, are often pivotal. They strip away illusions and compel the INFJ to dive into the depths of their being, emerging on the other side with renewed clarity and spiritual insight. They begin to realize that spirituality is not about adhering to external doctrines, but about cultivating inner alignment, integrity, and a sense of unity with life. INFJs often have a mystic's heart. They are drawn to symbolism, archetypes, dreams, and metaphors as means of communicating deeper truths. Their intuitive function, an eye, gives them a gift for perceiving patterns and meanings that transcend the surface level. It's not uncommon for an INFJ to feel a strong connection to multiple spiritual traditions, or to take an eclectic approach to spirituality, integrating wisdom from various sources: Christian mysticism, Buddhism, Sufism, Taoism, or even esoteric and metaphysical teachings. Because they are also feelers, INFJs experience spirituality as something deeply emotional and ethical. They often view spiritual growth as inseparable from personal growth, compassion, and the desire to help others. A significant part of their spiritual awakening may involve healing emotional wounds, not just their own, but also becoming conduits for healing in others. Many INFJs see their spiritual path as a calling to serve, to be light bearers or bridges between worlds, helping others awaken to their own truths. Solitude is essential to the INFJ's spiritual path. They need time alone to recharge, to connect with their inner wisdom, and to process the profound insights that arise from their intuitive mind. Nature, art, and quiet contemplation are often sacred to them, providing a space where the boundaries between the self and the universe blur. In these moments, INFJs often report feeling the presence of something greater, whether they define it as God, Source, the universe, or simply the interconnected field of all life. INFJ spirituality is also marked by an ongoing process of alignment. They are continually refining their lives to reflect their inner truths, often shedding old roles, relationships, or beliefs that no longer resonate with their higher self. This constant striving for congruence between the inner and outer worlds can lead them to make unconventional life choices, often prioritizing authenticity and meaning over social norms or material success. Despite their deep sensitivity, INFJs are surprisingly resilient on their spiritual path. Their inner convictions are strong, and once they have awakened to a deeper truth, they are unlikely to turn back. They become seekers, healers, visionaries, and often quietly guide others just by being who they are. They don't push their beliefs onto others, but instead lead by example, often radiating a calm, grounded wisdom that inspires trust. INFJ spirituality is not just a belief system, it's a way of being. It permeates every aspect of their life, often blurring the lines between the spiritual and the mundane. For the INFJ, spirituality is less about rituals or dogma, and more about the search for authentic connection, to self, to others, to nature, and to a greater, often ineffable force that gives life meaning. This connection is often guided by a quiet inner voice, a strong intuitive knowing that the INFJ learns to trust over time, sometimes after a great deal of inner struggle and external contradiction. As INFJs move through life, their spiritual awakening often becomes an evolving process of self-realization and soulful integration. They begin to see their inner conflicts, such as the tension between their idealism and the world's harshness, or their empathy and the need to set boundaries, not as flaws, but as sacred tensions that guide them toward wholeness. This reframing is often part of their spiritual maturation. They come to understand that light and shadow are both necessary, that healing is nonlinear, and that vulnerability is not weakness, but a pathway to divine strength. INFJs are naturally drawn to symbolism and metaphor, not just as literary devices, but as spiritual tools. They often dream vividly or receive insights through visions, synchronicities, and subtle emotional impressions that feel charged with meaning. These experiences might lead them to explore tarot, astrology, meditation, lucid dreaming, or energy work, not out of escapism, but because they recognize these as languages that speak directly to the soul. Even the INFJs who follow organized religion tend to engage with it in a mystical way, focusing more on direct communion with the divine than on formal structures or hierarchies. Because INFJs often feel the suffering of others so acutely, their spiritual path is often rooted in compassion and the desire to alleviate pain. However, this can also become a burden. Many INFJs struggle with spiritual burnout, giving too much of themselves, absorbing the emotional energy of those around them, and neglecting their own needs in the process. A major aspect of their awakening, then, is learning to embody spirituality in a balanced, grounded way. This involves recognizing that service does not require self-sacrifice to the point of depletion, and that their presence, insight, and authenticity are often more healing than anything they can do for someone. As INFJs evolve spiritually, they often undergo a shedding process. They let go of outdated roles, belief systems, and social masks. This shedding can be isolating, especially if their environment doesn't understand the changes they're going through. But this solitude is often essential. INFJs need time and space to connect to their higher self, to listen deeply to the inner guidance that is so central to their spiritual path. In this space of solitude, they often encounter profound insights, moments of grace, and a quiet, enduring sense of being held by something larger than themselves. Another key feature of INFJ spirituality is a profound sense of purpose. Even when they can't articulate it, INFJs often feel that their life is meant to contribute to something meaningful, something soulful and transformative. This isn't usually about ego or recognition. In fact, many INFJs would rather remain behind scenes. But there is a deep desire to live in alignment with truth, to be vessels of peace, healing, or wisdom in a world that often feels chaotic or disconnected. They long to help others remember their own divinity, their own wholeness. INFJ spiritual awakening may also bring with it a deepened relationship with the natural world. Many INFJs feel a spiritual connection to trees, water, the moon, the stars. Nature speaks to their soul in ways that transcend logic. The cycles of the earth mirror their own inner cycles of death, rebirth, and renewal. Nature teaches them that growth can be quiet, that transformation is often unseen until it flowers, and that there is wisdom in stillness and surrender. Dreams, visions, and inner guidance are often central to the INFJ's spiritual life. Many INFJs report receiving messages or insights during meditative states or while asleep, often in symbolic language. Their subconscious mind speaks to them in rich metaphors, and they often learn to decode these symbols as part of their spiritual practice. This inner dialogue becomes a compass. It leads them toward alignment with their highest self and offers them a sense of being guided, even when the outer world seems uncertain. As highly idealistic individuals, INFJs often undergo a period of spiritual disillusionment. This might come after they've invested deeply in a particular faith, philosophy, or relationship that ultimately fails to live up to its perceived spiritual promise. These periods can feel devastating, like a loss of innocence or a betrayal of trust. Yet they are often necessary stages of growth, catalysts that strip away false idols and ego attachments, forcing the INFJ to redefine what is true and sacred from within, rather than relying on outer validation. This is when many INFJs begin to claim their own spiritual authority. During and after these spiritual trials, INFJs become more discerning, more rooted. Their spirituality begins to mature, becoming less about seeking and more about being. They become less concerned with having all the answers and more interested in living the questions. Paradox becomes something they accept, even embrace. They can hold joy and sorrow in the same breath, recognize the presence of light and darkness, and honor the divine in every experience, even those that are painful or confusing. Many INFJs feel called to integrate their spirituality into their creative or professional lives. They may express their awakening through writing, art, counseling, teaching, or activism. Whatever form it takes, it is often fueled by a desire to uplift, to heal, to bring soul back into spaces that feel disconnected or devoid of meaning. This spiritual mission doesn't always come with fanfare or recognition. In fact, many INFJs carry out their work in quiet, subtle ways, planting seeds, offering insight, being a calming presence in a world that often feels loud and chaotic. The INFJ's inner journey also leads them to explore themes of shadow and integration. They come to understand that spirituality is not about perfection or bypassing pain, but about wholeness. They recognize the need to face their own fears, anger, grief, and unconscious patterns, not to banish them, but to bring them into the light of awareness. This process of shadow work becomes sacred. It allows the INFJ to move beyond duality, to accept the full spectrum of human experience, and to love themselves and others more completely. There is also a strong element of sacred solitude in the INFJ spiritual path. While INFJs are capable of deep, soulful connections with others, they often require long stretches of time alone to recharge, reflect, and commune with their inner self or source. These periods are not lonely but sacred. It is in solitude that INFJs often receive their deepest insights and remember who they are beneath all societal roles and expectations. They may have mystical experiences in nature, during meditation, or in quiet contemplation, where time seems to dissolve and a deeper sense of presence emerges. Eventually, the awakened INFJ reaches a point where they are no longer trying to reach the divine out there, but instead recognize it within, in their breath, their thoughts, their actions, their presence. They begin to live more mindfully, more intentionally. Every interaction becomes an opportunity for spiritual practice, every moment an invitation to embody love, wisdom, and peace. They may not speak of their spirituality often, but it is felt by those around them. People sense their depth, their clarity, their empathy, and their unshakable sense of purpose, even if they can't fully understand it. INFJ spirituality is a quiet revolution of the soul. It is a return to authenticity, a remembering of sacred truth, a soft but powerful light that illuminates the path not just for themselves, but for others. It is the journey of a healer, a mystic, a visionary, someone who walks between worlds and bridges the seen with the unseen. The INFJ doesn't seek to escape the world, but to transform it, one heart, one truth, one soul at a time. INFJs often notice patterns, signs, and messages in the world around them long before others do. A feather on the ground, a sequence of numbers, a line in a book that feels written just for them. These experiences feel orchestrated, not random. They sense that the universe is alive, intelligent, and in communication with them. It's not about superstition. It's about communion. It's about being in tune with a reality that is layered, nuanced, and deeply alive with meaning. And when others dismiss these insights or treat them as coincidence, INFJs often retreat further into their inner world, not out of superiority, but because they know this sacred dialogue is not meant for everyone to understand. As their spiritual journey progresses, INFJs often undergo profound internal shifts. They begin to release the need for external validation. They stop chasing perfection. They lose interest in fitting into roles that stifle their authenticity. These are not easy transitions. They can involve grief, isolation, and long periods of questioning. But through this shedding, something more essential emerges: the soul. The INFJ begins to live from the soul, speak from the soul, create from the soul. Their relationships, their work, their choices all begin to reflect this inner alignment. They become less reactive and more responsive, less driven by fear and more moved by love. They begin to embody the truths they once sought in books, mentors, or belief systems. A crucial stage of the INFJ's spiritual evolution involves embracing the paradox of being both human and divine. INFJs often feel as though they are straddling two worlds, the earthly and the transcendent. For a long time, this can be disorienting. They may feel too sensitive for the modern world, yet too grounded to fully escape it. But over time, they learn that their role is not to abandon one for the other, but to bridge them. They become translators of spiritual insight into human language. They ground divine love in everyday gestures. They bring the mystical into the mundane. In this way, the INFJ becomes a living embodiment of their spirituality, not through grand sermons or sweeping gestures, but through quiet presence, deep listening, and authentic being. Service is often the natural expression of an INFJ's spiritual awakening. They don't just want to understand truth. They want to live it and share it. Many INFJs feel called to help others awaken, not by telling them what to believe, but by holding space for their unfolding. They become counselors, healers, writers, artists, spiritual guides, not always by profession, but by essence. They become the calm in the storm, the mirror that reflects back someone's hidden light, the voice that whispers clarity when confusion reigns. Their spiritual leadership is subtle, often unnoticed by the world, but deeply felt by those whose lives they touch. Yet INFJs must constantly guard against martyrdom. Because they feel so deeply and care so much, they can lose themselves in the needs of others. Spiritual awakening for the INFJ is not just about opening to divine love. It is also about learning boundaries, balance, and self-care as spiritual practices. They must learn that their own healing, joy, and rest are not selfish. They are sacred. When they honor their own rhythms and tend to their own inner garden, they become far more effective vessels for the light they wish to share. Eventually, the INFJ reaches a place where spirituality is no longer something they do. It is something they are. There is no separation between the spiritual and the everyday. Making tea becomes a ritual. A conversation becomes a sacrament. Solitude becomes communion. Nature becomes church. Their life becomes a prayer, not in any idealized way, but in a deeply embodied sense. They live slowly, consciously, intentionally. They carry a certain stillness. They may not speak of God, but when they do, it is with reverence. They may not belong to a religion, but they walk as if they remember the divine lives within them and within all beings.